Today we're looking at Boris Johnson's new memoir, Unleashed. It feels like everyone's got questions about this book, and thankfully we've got the goods right here, the Amazon page is open, and we are ready to extract some information.
Yeah, think of it as your pre-read rundown, before you even crack the spine. And remember, folks, facts and tone, that's what we deal in, not political sides.
Exactly. So first things first, this book is a beast, 784 pages. It's massive.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? Did Boris Johnson come to play?
It's a statement, that's for sure. It's published by William Collins, released October 10th, 2024. And it's clearly designed to be taken seriously. This isn't some cash grab. This feels like he's trying to shape his legacy with this one.
And the title, Unleashed, it's like it's begging us to see if it lives up to the hype. What can we even tell from the book's description? What kind of ride are we in for?
Well, the language is certainly something. They use words like honest, unrestrained, and even deeply revealing, which isn't really something you see every day with these kinds of books, not your typical political memoir.
So it's going to be a bit more explosive.
Yeah, that's the impression I get. To get a better sense of it, let's look at the time periods it's covering. His time as the mayor of London's in there, including the 2012 Olympics, front and center. And then you've got his role in the Brexit campaign, his experience with the COVID pandemic, and then, of course, his time as prime minister.
It's like the highlights of his entire political career all crammed into this one massive book. But with all that serious stuff going on, what's the writing style even like? Is it bogged down with political jargon, or did he manage to make it, engaging?
That's where it gets interesting. A lot of reviewers are calling the style breezy, which, knowing Boris, could be good or bad. Some are even saying witty and entertaining. Not exactly what you expect from a political memoir, is it?
So maybe he's going for that fireside chat kind of vibe, trying to make you feel like you're getting the story right from him.
Yeah, perhaps. But we do have to remember, this is all carefully constructed. Even the casual language, it's deliberate.
Good point. Okay, so it's entertaining, it covers a lot, but are there any big ideas, any core messages that he seems to be pushing?
One that really stands out is this emphasis on the UK's potential, especially his whole levelling up agenda. It's almost as if he wants to use this book as a way to further those goals, even outside of an elected position.
Yeah, it's strategic for sure. Using his memoir not just to reflect on the past, but to actually shape the conversation going forward.
So not just personal, it's a tool. But enough about the publisher's perspective. What are people actually saying about this book?
Well, the early Amazon reviews are all over the place. I mean, it's sitting at 4.1 stars from 114 ratings.
Okay.
Some are calling it gripping, glorious, even authentic. You can tell those readers are really into that frank tell-all style.
Right, and that makes sense with everything else we've talked about. But 4.1 stars, that's not exactly a glowing endorsement. There's got to be some pushback in there. Oh, absolutely. There are definitely those who are calling it out, saying it's lies. They're taking issue with his version of events, it seems. The book's proving to be just as divisive as the man himself. People are having strong reactions on both sides.
Well, you don't sit down and write a 784-page memoir if you're afraid of ruffling a few feathers. Speaking of which, were there any specifics on that Amazon page that really stood out to you?
A few things, yeah. The description mentions Johnson reflecting on his mistakes and triumphs, which I gotta say is kind of interesting. In politics, admitting fault, that's a bold move. It'll be fascinating to see if he actually owns any of those missteps, or if this is more about controlling the narrative,
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. How does he balance that? What else caught your eye?
He talks about his perspective on the evil machinations of Parliament, and that's some strong language. Almost sounds a little conspiratorial, doesn't it? You really get the sense that he feels wronged by the political establishment, the same one that ultimately gave him the boot.
There's that unleashed energy again. It sounds like he's really leaning into this whole outsider persona, the guy who plays by his own rules.
Exactly. And then there's this whole bit about the betrayal he felt from his colleagues' betrayal. That's loaded. That speaks to some real hurt, I think, and a feeling of isolation during his time at the top.
It's almost like we're about to see a side of Boris Johnson we haven't seen before. The vulnerable side. The wounded warrior.
Maybe so, but it's important to remember memoirs by their very nature, they're subjective. We're getting his truth, filtered through his experiences and, let's be honest, his desire to shape how people see him.
That's a really good point. It's like we're getting a curated look behind the curtain, but we can't forget who's holding the curtain. Mm-hmm. So how do we even begin to reconcile the personal with the political in a book like this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a tough balancing act. On the one hand, you have Johnson the individual with all his ambitions and failures, and then you have Johnson the politician who wants to control how history remembers him.
Yeah, it really makes you think, that whole tension between the personal and the political. You just can't have one without the other.
Exactly. And Johnson, I mean, he's always kind of, well, maybe more than most politicians, he's always played with that line, haven't you noticed? Very deliberately.
So with Unleashed, is he trying to blur those lines even more, using this personal stuff to, I don't know, kind of justify his political decisions?
It's certainly a way to look at it. He knows the power of a good story. We all do, right? And this book, it's like a masterclass in controlling the narrative.
Okay, so we've spent all this time on this Amazon page. What's your final takeaway? What can we say for sure about Unleashed?
Well, it's safe to say that based on everything we've seen, this isn't just some dry, boring political recap, you know? It's personal, it's strategic, it even feels a little bit like a comeback strategy, all in one.
It's like he's chucking this book at British politics, like a literary Molotov cocktail. I'm kind of curious to see what explodes.
Only time will tell how it'll all play out right. But one thing's for sure, Unleashed gives us a peek inside the mind of a guy who, like him or not, shaped a nation, whether you agree with his methods or not.
Exactly. And that right there is why it's so interesting to me, I think. It's not just some memoir. It's like this time capsule of a really specific, really crazy time in British history. And we're seeing it through the eyes of the guy who was right in the middle of it all. So if you want a glimpse behind all that, the power, the drama, with a little bit of wit and controversy sprinkled on top, well, based on what we've seen today, it seems like Unleashed might just be worth a read.
Yeah.
Just, keep your BS detector handy, and maybe a little skepticism never hurts.